Welcome, everyone, to this very special presentation of the Spark CG Society. My name is Marina Antunes. I'm one of the producers of the Society, and I'm very pleased to be here today with two very special guests to talk about a very special film, War is Over. So I'd like to begin by introducing our guests today, producer Brad Booker. Brad is a seasoned film producer and former animator with 3 decades of industry experience. As the co-founder of Electro League, Brad seamlessly blends dramatic storytelling and innovative technology to maximize budgetary impact on screen. Before Electro League, Brad made significant contributions to the film landscape with productions like Rumble, The Book of Life, earning various nominations, including 5 Annie Awards. During 15 years at Real FX Animation Studios, he played a pivotal role in bringing animated feature films to the big screen. Brad's career began as an animator at Warner Brothers, Sony Pictures, and Wētā FX, contributing to iconic films like The Iron Giant, Osmosis Jones, Stuart Little, Spider-Man, and Lord of the Rings, The Two Towers, among others. Welcome to Spark, Brad.
Thank you for having us. Appreciate
And
it.
And I'm also very pleased to introduce our other guest, writer and director Dave Mullins. Dave is no stranger to Spark. He's been with us in the past. He is writer, director, and animator, and also co-founder of Electro League and a Pixar alum. His directorial debut, Lou, earned him an Academy Award nomination and acclaim at South by Southwest, as well as the San Francisco International Film Festival. At Pixar, they've played a crucial role in the Academy Award-winning films like Up and Soul, as well as hits such as The Incredibles 2, Cars 2, and The Good Dinosaur. Dave's animation journey started in 1995 at Disney Feature Animation with credits in iconic films like Stuart Little, Monsters, Inc., Finding Nemo, Cars, Ratatouille, Brave, Inside Out, and Coco. Alongside his creative pursuits, Dave studied computer science at Brown University and earned his BFA at the Rhode Island School of Design and holds 4 awarded patents for his role in developing groundbreaking animation tools at Pixar. Wow, those credits,
It
guys.
sounds really impressive when you compress like my last 30 years into like 1 minute. So thank you.
It's impressive. It is super impressive. And before we talk about, the film that we're going to talk about today, your latest project, I wanted to ask you first about your collaboration in bringing together Electro League. Like, where did that concept and idea come from, and how did the studio start?
Um, Actually, I had kind of written the business plan and started to plan what ElectroLeague would become. I was really actually very influenced by spending a lot of time on set with my good buddy Richie Bainham, who is visual effects supervisor on the Avatar franchise. He was on the first one and is, of course, on all the sequels. So he's been at Lightstorm with Jim for, well over a decade now. And, he comes from 2D animation. And so when we would go have dinner, have drinks, we would kind of talk a lot about how, we could potentially use that kind of technology, the real-time filmmaking and capturing performances on stage, and how that can quickly translate and get, what we call our reels when we're building our story reels, to more efficiently get an approximation of your film that much sooner. So I would say that's where the idea came from, and I had kind of started building it, and I left. This is as I was finishing up Rumble at Paramount, and it was a film that I had developed at Real Effects. And Dave, had just done Lou, and he got a lot of recognition from that. And I think, not to put, well, I'll let you speak to it, but he decided to leave Pixar and go out for his bigger creative pursuits and directing. And Dave and I met originally while we were working on Stuart Little at Sony back in, late 90s. I think I just worked on Iron Giant, and I went over and joined the team on Stuart Little, and that's where Dave and I met. And, we were great friends for the longest time, but B, I think we both took these separate paths, both very different, and kind of came back together and formed ElectroLeague, kind of taking the best of what we've learned out in the wild, if you will, and trying to build a studio that's very forward thinking, that uses technology, not to necessarily make films cheaper, but to basically empower the filmmaker in the real-time process to kind of, we say, filmmaking at the speed of thought. And that's really, we try to put the tools around the director and allow them to realize their film instead of putting stuff out. We have all the respect in the world for story artists, and this is just a very different approach to it, where we have script and we go directly from script onto the stage and capture versus waiting for storyboards and everything to come in over a longer period of time. We go out and get it on the stage, bring it in, our editorial is there with us on stage, and then we very much are focused on getting that human hand and the artist touch over the top of what we've built as our foundation of kind of a mixture of layout and animation, like rough animation blocking, and that gives us an early stab at what our film looks like. And then we have the artists come in over the top of that and breathe life into the world, which is what we did on this film.
And the thing that's really cool is, like, Brad and I both had a 20-year stint at those companies. Brad was a big part of, like you said, at Real Effects. I was at Pixar for 20 years, and we've lived in that family space of animation for a long time, that 4-quadrant or 5-quadrant, if you would use family as the 5th quadrant, for a long time. And we loved those films. We enjoyed working on it, and we loved being in that space. But as we started talking early on, Brad had the whole idea for Electro League and brought me in. And Jorge Gutierrez kind of describes me as an animation purist. I guess I was such a bastard about it, I guess. But Brad had this idea about going from script to stage as quickly as possible. And, it took us a lot of conversations. Brad had that big idea, and we talked a lot about it. I'm like, performance capture. And as we started working on this project, or even before we started working on this project, that how we wanted to approach it, we kind of figured out what works great for both of us. And I've definitely come over to Brad's point of view with this, because, being able to write and then go onto stage and work with the actors and capture everything there. I mean, hopefully, as Unreal and the real-time tools catch up, we'll actually be able to get some assets in early where we'll be able to have our lighting in there, some sets, plus our characters. And it's a really great experience. I did a little bit of the virtual cam work on Lou for the chase. Adam Habib was my DP on that film, and I actually really like being on stage. And it's just been a really interesting journey for me, because the way we did this film, though, early on we did use boards for the film, we are really trying to get to that place where we can go from script to being on stage. Because it's, as a director, like, it's a very quick feedback on it, and there's a lot of creativity, and we get to keep the team smaller, because for us, it's really important for us as, like, kind of the front end company before we get heavily into assets. We really want to be able to have a smaller crew. We want to do more with less. So that means the people that we have that we're working with now, we have a lot of wonderful folks that we're working with, have a bigger stamp on the film. And, as creatives ourselves, we were individual shot animators. Being able to have a bigger stamp on the film as a creator is really important. So it's like kind of more work, fewer people, but a bigger creative stamp. And that's what we're trying to build. And I really come over to this way of thinking, because even after you get your performance captured, and you have to have a team of animators there to really craft the final look, because we're very specific about our aesthetic. We're very specific about silhouette, timing, the style of the animation. And, as performance capture gives you performance really well, but to get a caricatured look, you need the artist's hand in there. And with us working with Wētā on this, the artists and the animators were just phenomenal. And it was nice because in our film, we have these really big battle scenes. So we shot the whole battle scenes with 5 or 6 performance artists, and we could fill a whole battlefield with just those performances. And our animators got to really focus on crafting the performances we need for this film. So for me personally, and what we're trying to do with Electro League, I'm a total convert. Like, I love the process, and I do feel like it gives me a lot of freedom in what we did on this film and what we're gonna be doing next.
That's awesome. Well, let's look a little bit more at War is Over. We're gonna play the trailer and then we'll come back right after and talk a little bit more about the project.
Hope you enjoyed it.
I mean, the film is wonderful. It's a really beautiful achievement. And before we talk a little bit about, the creative process of actually making it, I wanted to find out how you guys came to the project to begin with, because from the reading that I've been doing, Sean Ono Lennon started this process in 2021 when he was thinking about, doing a music video for Happy Xmas War is Over. And, the idea of a sort of like a Hallmark type of music video was not appealing. But at some point over the course of the year, he met up with you guys, and all of a sudden this project has taken on a life of its own. Can you talk a little bit about when you first came in contact with him and what those early discussions about making a music video or a film, or telling a story around this iconic song comes to become the film?
Absolutely. And it's funny because a friend of mine at Pixar introduced us and knew that Sean had been looking at Happy Christmas War is Over, because it is this perennial song that plays in holiday every year, and it keeps coming back, and it's definitely playing in our house during the holidays. And so from the get-go, I was like, okay, wow, okay, this is a big one. And also like, it's like, okay, music video, we're narrative storytellers. The music video things like this is very intriguing. But I was a little just worried about doing just a music video, but I was like, what, let's meet with Sean and see what he wants to do. So Sean and I met, and it was apparent right away he didn't want to do a music video. He didn't want to just do a bunch of images to his parents' song, and it's just doesn't really represent what the film means to him or what it means to their fans. He really wanted to focus, and very happily, he really wanted to focus on the anti-war message of the film and not the Christmas part of it. And the Christmas part of it is there because John and Yoko were very smart. They knew that if they made a Christmas song, holiday song, that they could put in this anti-war message inside the song, and every year that would play in their message of peace that they very much believed in would be presented every year at the holidays. So for me, that was very interesting right off the bat. And Sean saying, no, let's do a film. And I was like, great. So then we started talking, and in those first two meetings we had, the first meeting was like an hour. Second meeting was like maybe a couple hours. And within those few hours, we connected very quickly. We found the idea really quickly. And it's really what the film is today, what came out of those first couple of meetings. And it was like, we always talk about there's things that happen on this film that was like lightning striking the same tree like 6 times in a row. Like that was the first lightning strike for us, whereas like this, I came back and talked to Brad. I was like, I think this is going to be really cool. And then we talked about the story, and yeah, we should definitely pursue this. So it came from that. It was really about that anti-war message that he wanted to get out in the world in a bigger way.
How long was that writing process? Like, so you come up with this idea for the
Yeah.
film, and how long did it take you to actually write the script?
I'm not kidding. It was like an hour meeting and then
Wow.
a 2-hour meeting. And then I went and I wrote the script that night, a 10-page script. And the next day or so we got back together. And he's like, this is great. Let's go. It was that fast. I've never seen something that fast before. And it's just really inspiring where it all came from, because the initial conversation was so fertile, because we immediately started talking about symbolism really upfront. Like, okay, the bigger thing is, how do you get two groups of people that are 100% sure because of the labels they've either given themselves or the label that have been put on them in the world? You're on this side of the army, you're on that side of the army, or you're politically this way or that way. How do we get people that are so sure that they hate each other to connect? And then once they connect, they realize like, oh my gosh, we have a lot more in common than we thought. So the idea of the chess game was very symbolic in that, well, soldiers are like pawns in a chess game. So there's that level of symbolism that's happening in the film. And then, well, how would they do that? And then we started talking about, well, they could use like a carrier pigeon to bring these messages back and forth, which put us in the World War I sort of era. And and then the pigeon as being like is a dove, more or less, and a symbol of peace. Like all these layers started coming together really quickly. And the only conceit we really asked of the audience was, would you allow us not to explain how these guys started this game, and just accept that they are playing this game? Like, we have a whole story about how it happened, but we didn't want to explain that in the film. We just wanted them to get a connection right away. So it was really fast. It was crazy fast.
Yeah, it really was.
So you have the script, you go to Brad, we're ready to make this movie. What's the next step? Like what happens once you have a script?
Well, to Sean's credit, he put a little bit of money in just to get us going, to be able to hire, our production designer, Zach Retz, of Spider-Verse fame and the latest Puss in Boots movie. He's done amazing stuff. He's worked on a lot of things, but and Max Narciso, our character designer, we got those guys on board and started. It also allowed us to hire John Carr, our editor, and one of his assistants. And you know, we kind of did some rough boards just to get Dave able to think through, like, you know, what this thing really would become visually. So, you know, Sean got us going, and then, you know, next thing you know, I fly up to Northern California to Dave picks me up and we drive out to meet Sean, who was in Northern California recording an album. And we went to Sean's Airbnb to, you know, have our what we thought would be like an hour meeting. Well, it turned into a 24-hour meeting, and we actually stayed with him. We went to dinner that night, and, you know, over a couple bottles of wine, started texting with Peter Jackson, you know,
As one does.
as one does. But, you know, Sean had worked closely with Peter on the Get Back series, docuseries at Disney Plus, and, you know, Peter was engaged immediately and was like, you know, like World War One-ish era battle chess game, like all these things that he loves. He's like, I want to know more. So we send the script to him that night and wake up the next morning to Peter, you know, a Zoom invite with Peter, his producer Claire, who produces all his films, and David Connolly, the head of Wētā. So that all happened in basically a 48-hour period. So Thursday, then we get the invite on a Friday, and then I fly back down to LA on Saturday, and then we're on a 2-hour call with Peter Jackson and the gang.
I do want to interject just for a second, because that was the sound the iPhones make when you in the text goes off, or the mail. That was the scariest woo I've ever heard in my life. I'm like, are we doing this? Like, what's happening? Zoom, and it's like, it's permanent. He's gonna read it, you know. Like,
and then you have to wait for the three.
Another glass of wine.
And then you're looking at your phone for the three button.
Refresh. Yeah.
And the other thing to kind of frame what was going on when we first started this thing, the war in Ukraine had not. It was literally about ready to break out. You could feel it building, and that was like part of the discussion with Sean is like, look, you know, with the tensions in the world, we really need to, you know, it was important to him to carry on the legacy of his mom and dad's song and the message of, you know, the anti-war message, the message of peace.
It felt more relevant than ever.
And then, you know, a couple months go by where we get all this artwork together. And when we're on with Peter, that was about 2 weeks into the conflict. So the war had broken out. Peter, of course, knew everything about John and Yoko's catalog and their life. And, you know, he's a walking encyclopedia when it comes to them. And he's just like, look, with everything going on in the world, we want to get into animation. I'm really interested in this kind of subject matter. But above all, the world needs this message. So that in that moment, that day, they were in, and literally that was Saturday, and I had another call with David Connolly on Monday, and by Wednesday, I think we were meeting the crew and starting to plan how we were going to do this, because their first blush was that the scope was big on this. Like, there's no way we can do this, you know, and we're going to use Unreal. They had this special projects group that was really spending a lot of time developing tools around the real-time filmmaking, you know, the stuff we were trying to do. So, you know, it was, how do we do the scope of what we want to do in the time frame we need to do it, and, you know, inside the budgetary constraints. And to their credit, we figured it out, and they were amazing over the course of the next year and a half, I think.
And that was kind of like the second lightning hit on the tree, was like Peter immediately being interested and saying, we're going to give you the full force of our Wētā special projects team to make this film. And we're like, amazing. You know, it's
so there was that, and then we circled, you know, the story circles back to my buddy Richie, who, you know, he and I actually, he was animation supervisor on Lord of the Rings when we were both down there working on it, and I started my career the same day he did on Iron Giant. And so anyway, he's like, wait a minute, you did what? You got Peter to do what? Like, so, you know, this is all at dinner one night, and he's like, well, if you got that, then you're gonna have to shoot it on the Avatar stage. So let me talk to Jim and John. So, you know, John Landau and Jim Cameron about our little short film.
Yeah.
And next thing you know, the deal was made, and we had 7 days of shoot time on the Avatar stage. And you know, and then it just the dominoes started falling. Then like some of the early proof of concept stuff came out, and it looked amazing. And Epic, you know, our champion at Epic was Karen Duflo, who's an executive producer on this film. And she was basically like, guys, look at what these guys are doing, you know. And next thing you know, the Epic team, the spotlight of Sauron is on us. And you know, they basically got excited about it and gave us a little you know, some support from the Epic side through their mega grant you know, awards that they give. And then, you know, then the Thomas Newman thing happened. It was literally like, yeah.
It's like this tree is like completely demolished with like lightning strikes.
An embarrassment of riches, if you will, for a little short film. But all that said, it was still an indie project. And as a producer, you know, you have all these big names, which makes it kind of difficult in a different kind of way, because, you know, they're putting in sweat equity on a project like this. And I have to go figure out still how to pay the people working on it and pay for post and things that fall outside of what so it was a high wire act for sure.
Yeah, because I mean, it elevates, like every time somebody new comes on board, you're like, okay, now I have to elevate it like to that other level, and it just keeps getting higher and higher and higher, and you're left holding the bag.
And look, you know, even, you know, as you ask artists to come on, you can't ask people, not that we even wanted to, but you can't ask them to work for a reduced rate, because you've got Peter Jackson and Jim Cameron and all these names being floated around. But you know, at the end of the day, money was not changing hands on that. That was like, you know, hey, come use our stage, and hey, you know, Peter from his side, like we're gonna put our artist time on this thing. But you know, we didn't have to actually put cash money down. So it was really of this just brilliant gift and partnership with all these amazingly talented people.
Well, but I think that this speaks in part to, you know, the strength of the story and the power of the message, right? I mean, if you didn't have a strong story to begin with, none of this would have ever happened. And I think that speaks really highly to the material and the finished product, because the film is really, it's really beautiful, but it's also really dark. So I wanted to ask a little bit about developing the visual style for the project, because I read that you looked at some visual inspiration from Norman Rockwell paintings and Lydecker paintings. But when you look at those, they're very bright and colorful. And your film is very specifically, like it has a very narrow palette of color, except for the sky and your pigeon. But everything else is very like muted. So can you talk a little bit about, you know, taking the visual cues from these, like instantly recognizable styles, but with a completely different aesthetic?
Yeah, I mean, I'll talk about the muted aesthetic right off the bat. I mean, you know, Zach and I worked on the color script, you know, for quite a while, and you'll see that they're like, it gets very colorful at certain parts of the film, but you know, we're starting with the horrors of war, this cruelty of these kind of conflicts, and so you can't start with some bright, beautiful thing. It has to start off dark and ugly. And as humanity kind of comes back into the story, because the way I wrote it was, I wanted us to start with the hopelessness, the disconnection from each other, and the disconnection from humanity in the beginning of the film. And as the game kind of plays on, the color and the life starts coming back in, and you see the color palette get very wide as we get into the sort of the height of the game. And then and then that the war comes back in and like punches you in the gut, and it drops back out, and then we build again. I don't want to talk too much about how it ends, but for me, you know, having a painting background, It's something Brad and I discussed early on, like, one thing we knew is like as a studio, like we have to do something, we need to do something that reflects our taste, but also sets us apart as a studio. And like, not that we have a studio style or anything like that. We just wanted to do something that was visually really striking. And so for me, it was a combination of things. I mean, my love of painting, we're in the World War I era, so Norman Rockwell is one of my all-time favorite artists. J.C. Leyendecker is a painter that I really studied when I was studying painting. And that combination of the story and composition and caricature that you get from Norman Rockwell, but also the style, like you look at J.C. Leyendecker's paintings, you see every brushstroke, but it's so descriptive, like crazy descriptive. And so in talking to Zach, I said, we need, and Max for the character design, I was like, I want your painting on screen. I want your design on screen. We don't want this thing where, and we've seen it a lot, where you have oh, look at all this great production. Oh, this is so cool. And then like it goes through like the studio machine and it comes out and it's like this polished thing. It's almost like you have a lozenge and it's like, oh, you see all the shapes on it, and you suck on it for a little bit, it comes out, it's like, it's a perfect oval. It's like, we didn't want that. We wanted to keep the imperfections. We wanted to keep the brush strokes. We wanted to keep the art in there, the artist's hand. And so that was part of the sort of the treatment of the stylization of the film. But for us, having such a strong, deep connection to 2D animation and our love for it, I wanted to be able to do an outline shader, but not only an outline shader, having quill. So like there's a lot of hand-drawn defining sort of marks on the surface of everything. And so I wanted to feel like it was a sketch, but it was a painting. And like, how do we balance all that together to get a look that's very cohesive and not distracting? And, really props to Max, props to Zach Retz, props to Wētā, Keith Miller, all the work that he did with his amazing team. Like the look of the film, like what we designed is what's on screen. And that's like an achievement in and of itself. Like they were just total badasses. So we're lucky to be working with people that talented.
And if I understand correctly, I mean, Wētā is known for like photorealistic imaging, but animation, I mean, it's still animation, but not of this style of animation. So, I mean, this was a big step for them, right?
Yeah, and they were very excited about it. I mean, one of the things that's tough about working with an effects company, and they have to do this to watch their bottom line, they have to keep a division between the production company and their company, because every single note you get from a director or producer, whoever it is, it's just going to eat into their bottom line, and their budgets are already so tight. But what was great about working with Wētā is I wanted a really strong connection with the team. So I would meet with the animators and we would just talk about animation. We would do it like every couple weeks.
Yeah.
And then we brought in, friends like Michael Makarovich came in and gave a lecture just on acting. I think, two of those were with him, and really got to connect with those artists. And they typically don't get to talk to the directors one-on-one, but for us, in the way we want to do things, we want to be able to connect to the crew. And so it was exciting for them because of that connection we all had. I think it was exciting for them because it was different, like you're saying, from what they typically do, which is more, I mean, they're the masters of photorealistic awesomeness. And this was a very stylized thing, and everybody was just chomping at the bits. I mean, we were told like people really wanted to work on this film because the stylization and the story, and we felt really connected to them in that way because of that.
I want to talk a little bit about the production, but before I do, I also wanted to ask one other thing about the storytelling itself, because one of the things I noticed the second time around was that there's no, and I'm sure this was on purpose, there's no clear indication of who is who in this war. Like there are no markings, there are no there's no emblems, there's no flags. Like there's some slight variations.
Yeah, there are. They're just very subtle. They're very subtle.
So I asked my husband, I'm like, can you tell? Like, I know this is World War I, but I don't know who's supposed to be who. He couldn't tell either. So
that was by design. So and that comes back to the core idea we had when, I met with Sean, is that, we were talking about World War One, but we wanted it to be broader than a single conflict. Because look, you say it's World War One, we go, okay, this is the British and this is the Germans or whoever is in this particular on this battlefield. You go, oh, well, then we're talking about those people and those people. And what we wanted to do, we wanted to make this story about every war, not a war, not a particular war, but every war. And so the measures that we went to make that happen is it was sound, it was character design, it was casting, it was like a ton of stuff. So casting wise, we tried to get representation from as many cultures as we could afford with our characters budget. So you'll look on each side and go, oh, well, who are these people? And that's intentional because we want it to be like everybody can see themselves, regardless of which side of the conflict it is. And then you look at the uniforms, we designed all the uniforms, we designed all the emblems, we designed the flags, which are very subtle in the background. And there is also a stylistic thing in which Winston, who's on one side, everything on his side, and not to get too film school about it, is very angular. His chest set's all squares, his tent is a triangle, like everything about him, the emblems on his jacket, like all the designs, the weapons, everything's angular. Even like the watchtowers are angular. And on Abel's side, the other side, everything's round. His tent's round. He's a rounder design in his face. Everything's round. So we were trying to find our own language of like, this feels like World War One, but which part of World War One is it? We wanted that. And even in with sound, I wanted like, okay, let's get the trench guns from World War One. Let's get 50 calibers from World War Two. Let's mix that in with Blackhawks from modern day. We had stuff from the Falkland Islands. We had stuff all over the place. So they're in the trench, which looks like World War One, and you hear this helicopter go over. And we just wanted to misplace it so it wasn't about this particular conflict. It's about every conflict.
And do it in a way that people feel it instead of hear it. We didn't want it to jump out and have people go, wait a minute, why are there helicopters? It's like a subliminal thing that just makes people, it just subliminally gives them a feeling that this is a different conflict than just World War One. It's just the carrier pigeon kind of roots it in that time period. So it's like an alternate World War One reality.
So let's talk a little bit about production and what this pipeline looked like, because I'm still not fully 100% sure what this looks like on a timeline where you are. So you have a story, you have a script, you've got all these people on board to start actually like doing production. You've got some designs. So when do you actually, go onto a stage and start shooting, and how does that translate into you start your animation? Can you kind of walk us through that process?
Yeah, I mean, we basically had to build some assets to be able to go on stage, just due to the timeline and when Avatar was happening and when the stage was available. We did actually do it sooner than we probably wish we could have, because, we instead of having each character represented and the final assets built, we had Winston finished at that point, and he became all the characters.
All of them.
So it was weird in that way, but for Dave and I, it was fine because we could see past that. It was just like, I remember we showed Sean for the first time, and I think he had nightmares for 3 weeks running. But
it was a bunch of naked Winstons running around fighting each other, and he's like, and he lit, like, I remember his expression on his face. He's just like, what the beep did I just sign up for? What are you guys talking about? We're like, no. Look, and no matter how much you prep for somebody with a bunch of naked men running around fighting each other, it's just, you can't prepare people for that.
Right. Crazy. But yeah, so we kind of rushed to get the initial capture, and at one point in time we were trying for a 2022 release, and it quickly became apparent that was never going to happen. Avatar just became this giant beast that Wētā was wrestling, and we didn't get the crew. in the time that we thought we would get it. And not only that, like as you do when you get into the filmmaking, like there are things that we needed to work through story-wise and get figured out. So for all the right reasons, it pushed into 2023. And we got the principal capture here in Los Angeles, down in Manhattan Beach on the LEI stages, which is where they did shoot Avatar. And then on subsequent, because this is all about, it's a very iterative process. We go out and capture, principal, we get all that stuff edited together. And from that, we start making decisions on what needs to change and what needs to get better and lose this, add that. And the subsequent shoots happened in New Zealand where, Dave and I were working directly with them, while we were here.
Yeah.
Working with Aiden Martin, the animation supervisor, and David Scott, the digital cinematographer. And so they went to the stage a few times to kind of make changes and fill in the gaps as we found them.
I would be delivering thumbnails like, here's the shots, and like, these like scratchy thumbnails to Aiden and to Aiden and both David, to their credit, we had such a good relationship that they're so talented at what they did. Like we could talk through a lot of it. I could give them an idea and they would go and shoot it and bring it back, and then we would craft from there. Those guys were fantastic.
Yeah. And they actually came here during principal photography. So they flew up from New Zealand. We had a live action DP named Antonio Riestra, who is from Mexico City. He worked on all the principal stuff, and he worked closely with Dave to figure out some of the camera stuff before we went into the shoot.
Yeah, we had Antonio. I would sit down for these sort of longer sessions and like talk about Lynn's kit. We would talk about just like, Lynn's choice, composition, lighting. He was really great early on, like in the pre-production stages of that. And then he was also shooting for the VCam basically for the performance capture, which isn't what you're really using as much, because we knew we were going to come back a week later and shoot. And so when we came back for the virtual cam shoot a week later, it's me and Brad and Antonio, and we're all sitting at the table getting ready to walk in and do all the camera work. And one of the folks that work at the Manhattan Beach Studios come up and says, excuse me, Antonio, you have COVID. You have to leave the set. And we're like, we're about to shoot. So they were great because what happened is we went on stage. I had the VCam. We got Antonio on Zoom, and we were just doing everything. It was just this weird digital thing that we were doing, but we got all the shots, and I'd be like, hey, I'm thinking about this. And I'd come down and, that part of it, the VCam part of it's like awesome. It's just really fun. And then, it was a bummer for Antonio because of the whole COVID thing. But no, he was a very important part of the film.
And yeah, so it just became an iterative process that it bounced, back and forth. They would capture more stuff, give us new shots. We would ingest it in editorial, and it just kind of was a volley kind of situation back and forth as we, honed our reels and got closer to finding what the story was over the course. But yeah, I mean, it was brilliant watching some of the first test footage, of lit and textured scenes, because, what we were trying is it's not super straightforward to get a stylization like that in any software, but let alone to do it in real time inside of a game engine. I think I believe we were kind of the first people to do a style like that was so painterly, and the outline shaders, that stuff hadn't been done before. So, Wētā was writing tools for that stuff and kind of building a pipeline on the fly. It helped get them down the tracks faster and sooner, for their bigger effort as far as the studio is concerned. But for us, like, it was so essential that those tools were there to kind of execute on this visual kind of creative vision that Dave had for this.
So if I'm understanding correctly, you were doing capturing and sort of building out the story? And was the animation done later, or was it all being done at the same time?
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so we're going from script. We have some rough boards that we're working from, and then we're shooting, and then you have the discovery of the shoot. And then you have the VCam where you're trying to hone in and like, oh, we get ideas and we're gonna sort of reimagine or plus what was in my head, and then you get it up on reels. And we got it up on reels really quickly, and you go, oh, okay, besides all the naked single guy, one guy running around, we could see that there was things that weren't translating from script into edit. And so that's where that process was so important, is that you have to like stop at a moment and go, okay, this was the intention, this is what we shot, this is what it is.
Mm-hmm.
What it is isn't working, because we had a problem with the third act, and it read great. We had great, thought it was great when we were shooting, and then you get in the reels, it's like, oh man, we're really missing something here. We're missing a special ingredient here. And then we went in and reworked it. So it's that iterative thing that we're really trying to do with ElectroLeague.
Yeah, but the animation is something that happens kind of on top of this performance that we capture on stage, that in both the character performance and even the layout of the camera and stuff, that just acts as a foundation, and then the team of really talented animators go in over the top of that, because Icarus, the pigeon, was keyframed. We didn't capture the pigeon, obviously. So you have this style that we found in her that needed to translate back into what the soldiers are. So, again, one thing informs another. It's this process of finding it, but we never, from the very beginning, we never wanted to just get raw motion capture. Realistic human motion would never have fit our aesthetic for this film. So the animators have to go in and really push the stylization of the motion and the animation and the performance to match our visuals.
Yeah, I mean, we even talked about like, look, if the data and the capture is helping you, and you want to pull some frames out of there, pull some key poses out of there and animate from there, do that. Like, we really just like, it was really about the performance more than anything. And like I was saying before, the date, like the performances are fantastic, especially with like all these big battle scenes, and our performers were fantastic, like really great performances from our capture actors. But you get into it, and then you have to get into the specifics of, okay, what is the film now, and how are we trying to push this, and how are we trying to get this look at this aesthetic and this acting style. And it was a great springboard for animators and what the film ended up being.
Can you talk a little bit about getting that first pass at the animation? You get back the first tests. Are you happy? Do you think there's still a lot of work to be done here? Like, what was the first reaction when you saw that?
It was like, okay, it's like one scene's cutting to the next scene for 8 minutes straight. We got that working. I mean, it wasn't that bad, but it really, the first reels, when you see the reels, it really reveals the things that are working, the things that aren't. And it's just like any other film. It's just, you want to get to that point as quickly as possible so you can start fixing all the things that are broken, listening to the film, like, I mean, the film kind of wants to be this, like, trying to make sure that the vision is there and working, but also like, hey, there's some things that are like your babies, and you just have to kill your babies, as the saying goes, because it's hurting the bigger picture. But there's things like in the beginning of the film, we have a shot where you see the snow, and then this sergeant's boot comes in, and and as he steps out, the snow fills in with blood. That was something I knew from early on, like really, I mean, we talked about this really early on. When I was writing the script, it was like one of the first shots in my mind, because there's so many layers of information you get just from blood seeping in from snow, fresh snow. And it's been really amazing that the way people have connected, they've seen the film, have connected to that shot, because it gives you so much information on this like primal level. You just feel like, oh my God, what these guys are in. So, you know, there was a certain point where the budget was like, I don't know if we could do that shot. And I have to give Brad credit, because he's like, the shot's going to be in. We might have to cut it for time right now, but it's coming back. And like, I'm like, hey man, whatever we got to do to make the film, you know, like I'm like crying.
Yeah.
And he's like, no, we're doing it.
Dave did cut the shot at one point, and I told Sophie Cherry, the producer at Wētā, I'm like, that shot, because that was a tough shot for them. It scared them because it's got a lot going on in that shot, and you know,
we struggled to shoot it too. Like,
yeah.
I was having a really hard time shooting.
Right. So I just told her one-on-one, I'm like, don't worry, that shot will be back. Like, I knew how important it was to him, and I knew how important it was to the short too. Like, it says a lot. It really is one of those shots that sums up the whole short. And look, it was, I think, a very tough shot for them to get all the effects and everything to work properly,
Elements,
but it was well worth it, because you know, in a lot of the screenings that we've done, people point that shot out
It's the
as
first or second thing people say. It's crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, it's super, and that's the one that comes to mind whenever I think of the film is, well, Icarus. I didn't know the pigeon's name, but now I do. Icarus, which is very
super
memorable.
creative name for a bird, right?
I love it. But that shot is, like you say, it kind of sums up the you know, where these men are, and the situation that they're in, and it's so powerful. So I'm glad you fought for it, Brad, because it's very, very well deserved. So
it's like, it was literally one of those things like, it's okay. like ugly crying, like, it's fine, we'll just take it out. It's okay. But he was great. So.
Yeah, and to Wētā's credit, they knew it needed to be in there too. It was a tough shot for them to nail, but you know, I think both before and after knew that it was the right call to fight for a shot like that, because it is just, from a symbolistic standpoint, it just says everything about the short.
You know, for a film that doesn't have any dialogue, sound and music becomes a really key factor here. And I mean, you also have this iconic song that we expect is going to play at some point. Like, how is this going to come into the picture? Can you talk about, you know, you I think, Brad, you were mentioning, or I can't remember who mentioned the helicopters. That's something that I didn't pick up on, but it just goes to show just how intricate the sound design is in the film. So can you talk a little bit about building this dynamic soundscape for a war movie that also has this, like, just beautiful score, that, like, just it's the emotional roller coaster of the film, right? I mean, it guides you through what the characters are feeling.
Yeah, from a partnership standpoint, Formosa Group did all the sound, and they're you know, I've worked with them on every one of my films, and I can't say enough about them as a group. But Jack Whitaker and Duncan McRae were our two guys that we chose, and
we're not worthy.
Absolutely fantastic. Like, before our film, they just finished Masters of Air, which is, you know, the new Band of Brothers season that's coming to Apple Plus very soon. But yeah, they've won Oscars, like, I probably 6 out of the last 10 years. I'm exaggerating, I'm sure, but they won for Dune, they won for the Mad Max movies, and they're nominated for something every year. They're just, you know, they're at the top, and they are very loyal to me. I'm very loyal to them. So I brought them to the table, and then, you know, Dave, you can tell from a creative standpoint, like, it was a dream.
It was a dream.
They're absolutely fantastic, you know.
They were like another one of those lightning strikes, was having Jack and Duncan and Formosa on it. Thomas Newman obviously is like a double lightning strike. The song itself was the hardest part of the film. Like, look, this is the reason why we're making this film, is because of the song. And it was the hardest thing to place in the film, because, you know, like, do we open on it? No, that's not quite right. At one point, Sean said, you know, we were struggling so much with the placement of the song and how to incorporate it into he's like, look, if you need to just play it over the credits because you're doing such a good job representing the message of the song, you can just play it over the credits. And once he said that, it really gave us a lot of freedom to, okay, well, let's not worry about it, and let's just make sure the story is completely working, and then let's work on the score. And once we did that, you kind of like, okay, you kind of like loosen up and you go, no, I think it would really work. Like, of course, it's got to be at the climax of the film. That's the whole point of this. So getting Thomas Newman on the film, who, you know, had been a dream of mine forever to work with him, as long as I can remember. Getting him on the film, he has such an emotional, the way he approaches film isn't really thematic. It's not really, it's more I don't know how else to describe other than emotional. Like he composes.
It comes from the gut, yeah. Like
Yeah.
it's
like he says,
not in his head as much as
it's
it
in his
really
heart.
feels like it's in his heart, and
Yeah.
he just knew it felt right, and
Yeah, like he'll do these sketches, like he'll get in the studio, and it's amazing because he's not just sitting there doing some demo stuff. Like he gets his artists in and they start working on things together. And it's just this sort of methodology, the way he creates sound, and like, you know, the opening fluttering of Icarus's wings, that was part of that's a woman's voice that's being kind of processed a little bit, like da, 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 like along with the strings and everything else in there. So, you know, I went in a little, you know, we'd struggled with the temp music, and I went in a little nervous, in that, you know, like, do we need to, in the score, do we need to pull some of the song into the score to set people up so it's not such like a hard right turn? He's like, no, let it be a hard turn. And I was like, okay. And, you know, the first few meetings, he was just presenting these beautiful sketches. Basically, the first meeting was a beautiful sketch, and it gave us this opportunity to just, I was like, well, here's what I like, here's what I don't. And he's like, here's what I like, here's what I don't. And then we had this great conversation. You know, some of the things I kind of dug in on, some of the things he kind of dug in on, but we just found this place, which is the score, which is like one of the just my favorite scores. It just happens to be an R movie. But he was able to bring this sort of level of maturity to it. It's not only just emotional, but it's modern, but it sits with the look of the film, and it plays into the song just perfectly. So I mean, I just sing the Thomas Newman's praises all day long because I can't believe what he did with the score. It's like a miracle, a musical miracle or something.
Yeah. It's like the short never quite fit together perfectly, and we couldn't quite, you know, like Dave said, how you start the song and exactly where, and like it never quite fit. And then when Tom came in, it just all clicked into place.
Yeah.
And became that you know, we felt like it became a well-oiled machine at that point. Like it just all clicked and was humming in kind of unison.
Everything I was hoping for emotionally, shot on a shot-by-shot basis, he was just so good at building it with the score and backing it up, because he's the voice of our characters, basically. Not basically, he is the voice of the characters emotionally. And it's just, I can't say enough good things. I'm gonna like babble on for like 20 minutes about how great a job he did. But it really did, like Brad's saying, it really just, the film came together when his score got in there. And you know, you worry, it's like, we knew that, we felt that like this is working, the story is working, the emotions there, the connections are there, symbolism, all the stuff that we're layering in, the cinematography, like the design, the production, like we feel like everything's there, but it's just that last little piece of them, like it's just, we literally weren't sleeping. And I think we were saying it today, like after that first meeting with Tom, I went home and slept that night, and I hadn't slept in a while. So that was a amazing little relief, huge relief.
I mean, you guys did a lot on this movie that is only possible really because of, you know, COVID, like this whole working remotely. I mean, you were working with the team in New Zealand for a large part of the production, different hours. Like this is like, it's basically somebody's working on this thing all the time, 24 hours.
All the way around the globe.
Yeah, really.
Right. So, I mean, can you talk a little bit about like managing schedules and technology to make sure that everybody's on the same page and you're all, you know, connected and everybody knows what everybody else is doing. Because I mean, that's a big task, especially on, you know, a shoestring
it was
budget and a
easy.
big
No
production.
problem.
You should tell her about our our ElectroLeague's IT department. You're looking
If
at
only.
you're looking at ElectroLeague's
We
IT
did everything,
department.
and I'm not exaggerating. It's like we don't have an assistant helping us. We didn't have any production management on our side. It was literally Dave and I doing,
File
everything.
loads, like
But credit to Wētā, they did have a full team on their side, and it was very, very helpful for them to be on top of stuff and have, look, you can track stuff on paper, or you can have a well-oiled production management pipeline, which they did have. So on the CG side of things, that was great, but we still had editorial and art and all the other stuff to track. So it really was a bit of a patchwork of different tools and stuff that we kind of pieced together to just hobble across the finish line. I, I I don't think from a creative standpoint, there was nothing left on the table, but from a production management standpoint, it just we brute forced it. Like, it's a 10-minute film. Like, you can brute force anything. You can't do that on a feature or a series, but on a short, we were able to do it.
It's certainly a great sort of starting point for, moving forward with Electro League, right? I mean, you've done this project. It was a lot of sweat equity on your part. You've created this amazing piece of work. And now, you know what works, you know what doesn't work for the next one. But before we talk about the next one, let's finish with this one. So
okay.
18 months into, you're in production for 18 months. You finally get to sleep once it's delivered. Okay, so can you walk me through the first time you guys see the final cut, the finished picture? Because I mean, the reality is you could keep tinkering until the end of time, but at some point you need to say, no, it's done. This is the finished product. Can you talk a little bit about, sitting down and actually watching it from beginning to end with all the pieces put together and what that was like?
Yeah, when is that moment? Like, a film's
Well,
never done, so final mix is really the first time you see it and hear it all together.
Yeah, it's so incremental. Like, you're taking all these steps. It's not like a big surprise. Like, it's like you've been taking every little step along the way. So there's these milestones that happen. One of the milestones was completion of animation. One of them was completion of lighting. One of them, when you start to see the first animated shots come in and like, oh man, this is good. Like, oh boy, it's getting good. And then it's like, oh, and then you start seeing some lighting and shots like, oh man, this is getting good.
Yeah.
And then, you just keep the effects start coming in, it just starts layering. And then it's like another milestone is the first time you hear the score click in. Like, I think it was like the second or third time we met with Tom, and we heard the score to picture, and he kind of buttoned things up and like really place score to picture. It's like, holy shit. Like, it's like those moments. And then we get with David Cole, who color timed or DI'd the entire film. Like, all the things that we had to like tune up to make sure that the color was ramping across shots. You're like, oh my God, this is great. And then you get with sound. And so I think it's incremental. And I still look at it's always going to be the thing. I still look at the film like, I want to fix that, 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 I want to fix that. But as you stand back and you look at the film, I think we're both so happy with how it turned out and how hard everybody worked on it.
And proud of it. Like,
proud of it.
We really are. I mean, look, there are always things you're going to change, but I think, we both feel like it stands on its own, and we've got, there are no, which isn't always the case, but on this one, it is what it is. Like, this is the piece of art we made to put in the world, and it's complete, and we're proud of it. And, hopefully as many people, on the planet will see this at some point. But
the thing is, you never finish the film, you just run out of time. And that's what, I don't care who you are. I don't care how big your studio is, how small, what big name director, producer, writer, whatever. I mean, Brad Bird told us that early on. He's like, you never finish the film, you just run out of time. So you have to prioritize what you can do with the budget that you have left. And so I think Brad and I work really well together. Brad is I would say Brad's director minded, I'm producer minded, and we like really mesh that way. Like it just is a good partnership between the two of us. So that's how I think we got the level that we were able to get, because we're both thinking about both sides of it all the time.
How about the first time you shared the film with a public? Like you were at a screening with an audience at a festival or family or whatever, and you see the reactions of the audience. What was that like for you guys? 'Cause, I mean, this is much different than your previous
Well,
projects, right?
Yeah.
yeah, I think we had different experiences with that.
You go use first.
Well, the first time I ever showed it when it was completely done, because we did a screening that I'll let Dave talk about with Sean at the Woodstock Film Festival. But I showed it to a couple of executives here in Hollywood, and I wasn't prepared that it would wreck people. Like literally, one of the executives was in tears, and it was an emotional meeting. And everybody jokes about the people in Hollywood not having a soul and that whole thing. Well, it's not true, because I saw it in the room. I saw humanity kind of unfold in the room. It was an emotional time around the second conflict that had just started.
Yeah.
So there's all that, and then but I think I wasn't prepared for the power of this short, and how people could potentially respond to it. And like, everybody's different, and you come to it with different baggage and different, things that have happened in your life. But for that particular screening, and it was like the perfect screening environment. We mixed this film with Formosa in Atmos, and we actually had an ex Abbey Road guy come over, and he mixed the song in Atmos. So they took John's vocals, separated them from Yoko and from the choir, and then the instrumental stuff was all broken up. And when you mix in Atmos, it's object based, so it's you literally can decide how much of John's voice is in what speed of the 52 speakers or whatever across the grid. Yeah. And that screening room had still, I think to this day, the most beautiful sound I've heard, because it just was like the perfect size room, and it was just a very powerful experience. And then
Yeah, for me, I mean, on my first film, my wife Lisa is like such a big part of sort of a touchstone for me if things are working or not. And my first film was very, 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 very difficult for me. And for a number of reasons I'm not going to get into, but I was always showing her throughout the film. And on this one, we decided, I'm like, I'm going to show you at intervals. I'm going to there would be little things I like, hey, can I get your opinion on this? But there'd be like little, because my wife's she a filmmaker, animator. And on this one, I was like, let's do this at a much bigger intervals. Like, so let's get a couple months between full showings of the film. And what was happening, like I would talk about things like here and there, hey, take a look at this eye design or whatever. But every interval that I showed her, I'd say the early intervals, she was like, this is very cool. Like that was sort of the response. And then as we got a few months down the line, like, hey, check this out. We just finished this really cool cinematography pass on this. And then she started getting emotional. And then we were out of animation, and I would show her, and she would start really, and my wife she's tough. And so like to get her to be emotional about something, I know it's a lot. Showed her animation, and then the waterworks started. And not that that's what we were trying to make people cry. It's not that. It's just, she was really connecting to it. She was proud of me. And I think by the time we got to, I held off for a while. I showed her the lit version. It wrecked her. And then with the Tom score, she's like, this is just like, she's like, so I'm so proud of you. I can't believe that you and Brad created this and that you've been able to pull this off because, you know, we haven't had studio jobs for regular pay for 3 years almost because we're out trying to make this studio, make this film. And for her to get behind me and say, hey, we're going to use our savings, we're going to use all these things to make this film. It was a huge deal. She said, you have to do this. So I think for me, that screening when she saw heard the score with picture for the first time, that was like the big one to me. I was like, oh my God, this is a huge reaction. And then I'd say the public response where we showed it outside of kind of friends and family was I guess the first time we showed it was at Woodstock, right?
Yeah, and it wasn't even a complete version of it.
Do we have Tom's music? Do we even have his score in it?
I don't think so. I don't
I don't
remember.
think so.
We definitely
What's the
it was
first
if it was a very temp
Was
version.
Pixar the first time we showed it with score outside? Like, really showed it? It might have been.
Yes.
Oh my God, it was Pixar. So, okay, so this is the answer to the question, to your question. So I've been outside of Pixar for, I've been away from, I left Pixar 3 years ago, and to go back to my alma mater with all my friends and filmmaking connections that I had there, the people that I'm close to, we brought it into the Presto screening room, and I think it was like people were standing. And I had like, a lot of the animation department was there. There was the story department was there. There's people from art. Like there's a lot of people in this, and it was really nerve-wracking. I'm just like, oh my God, what are they going to think? And the reaction that we got to it and the discussion we had afterwards, it like literally my heart was bursting from it because everybody was so kind to us and so generous with their applause. I've never had so many people in one day tell me they were proud of me as I did that day, because everything is the very first thing they say to Dave, we are so proud of you. That is such a beautiful film. And it was like repeatedly. And I just went home that night and I was just like, it was just a lot to take in. It was very emotional. So for me, that was the showing at Pixar, going back home and showing it and getting that kind of response, that meant everything to me.
Oh, guys, I'm getting teary-eyed. I don't know why, but it's just happened. So thanks for that. Make me cry.
I know. Hurry up and move on. I think we're all getting that way.
Well, I think that this is a great place to kind of stop and congratulate you again for the amazing work. The film is really powerful and it's so beautiful. Like all around, it's the love and devotion that you guys had to the story and to telling a really powerful, emotional film. This is it. Like it's beautiful. So congratulations on that. And thank you so much for being so open and providing so much time and so much insight into the making of the project. It's been really wonderful to speak to you both.
Thank
It's
you.
funny. I'm sorry.
No, I was just gonna say thank you for wanting to talk to us, and thanks for the kind words on the film.
Yeah, it's funny to talk roughly an hour about 11 minutes of film. We always laugh about that. It's like
there's a lot to dig into. Okay, we probably could have gone for like 2 or 3, and then you add more of the team in, and it's like you can really get into the weeds.
Yeah,
but thank you so much. We really appreciate it, and we love Spark, and I hope everybody that sees this enjoys it.
Thank you again so much, and best of luck with the awards season of War's Over. I'm sure it's going to do really, really well. Congratulations again.
Thank you.
Thank you. So for those who stay, we have an extra little special bit of information about our four-walling process on War is Over. Four-walling is when you run the film for 7 consecutive days in the theater so that you can be a qualifying run for competitions like the Oscars and things like that. So you were picking up from there.
Go ahead.
Okay, so Brad and I both had the date wrong for when we had to four-wall it for a qualifying run for the Academy Awards. And Brad calls me about 6 o'clock on a Thursday night, and he says, oh oh my God, we got the date wrong. We have to get the in theater tomorrow. I'm like, what? Like tomorrow? I'm like, oh my God, what are we gonna do? We're like freaking out on the phone. We're like, how are we gonna get into the theater when we have the DC people? So we're like, I'm like, wait a minute. I have an idea. Like I know somebody. I know a guy. I know a movie guy. And I hang up the phone. I call my friend Derek Zemrak, who owns the Orinda Theater, and I'm like, Derek, you have to call me. We have a movie emergency. Call me. Click. And I get a call from him, and he's like, I'm playing a soccer game right now. What do you want? I'm like, dude, I need to get my movie in the theater tonight. You gotta help me, please, God. Oh Lord, please help. And he's like, okay, I'm on it. And he left his soccer game. He's driving to the theater. I got like the DCP like on a drive, and I'm driving to the theater. I'm like, dude, what are we gonna do? What are we gonna do? He's like, no problem. I got this. And within, I think it was 2 hours of the phone call,
It was, yeah.
I texted him back. Derek had our film on screen.
Wow.
We had sold it to, there's 5 guys. I'm like, you 5 guys, come here. You're going to see a movie for free. I was like, do you have any coins in your pocket? He's like, I got a quarter. I'm like, give me your quarter. I was like, then he gave him, you know, it was 5 cents each. He gave him like 5 printed tickets. I'm like, come in here and watch this movie we just made. And these guys sat down. And that was our first screening to the public, was these 5 guys that we got. Derek like screened the movie, and I send Brad a photo 2 hours after this conversation with it up with ticket sales. And you were like, what just happened?
You guys might have handwritten them, but you also that night sent a printed out ticket.
Yeah, that was the second. Yeah.
So
okay, you know, those 5 guys are probably like, holy shit, we saw the world premiere of this thing.
But luckily we had a couple slack cushion days. So the next day became our first official day.
The first official day. Yeah.
First official day,
I wanted
because
to
that
be
night
one of those 5 guys.
we had to get the website and all the show times. You've got to like prove that you have the show times out ahead of it. So yeah, it was all super crazy last minute. And
2 hours from
from
like, oh my God, to it's on screen. It's the craziest thing.
I felt like Dave gave birth to our child, and I didn't, you know, I was stuck in the Atlanta airport or something, you know.
But I'm good.
Yeah.
You know. But props to Derek Zemrak, who we thanked in the film, because he really did help us out. And he's such a, like, the Arena Theater is this beautiful, it's right around from my house. It's a beautiful like Art Deco style theater. Derek's like a huge patron of the arts. Like, he keeps that theater alive because of his love for film. And man, he really helped us out big time. So
yeah,
big love to Derek.